African superstar. Yes, I'm back at it again. Shout outs to the African Superstar family. Big shout outs to my members only who support our platform on a monthly basis and get access to behind the scenes content. If you are interested in members only content, make sure you subscribe and get access today. I want to also give a shout out to those of you doing business with the African Superstar. I offer a myriad of services, including custom trips to Ghana, mentoring, consultations, and we also have an upcoming group tour in October. Me and Mr. Taye Uhuru. Yes, if you're interested in that tour, please make sure you join us at www.tayeahuru.com. Big shout outs to you, Mr. Brown Coat Blue. I see you there. Thank you for being the first one in the room and being on code. Yes. I want to also encourage you guys to familiarize yourself with the African Superstar music. Yes. I got news that my latest track, Boom Boom, has been spinning in Cape Coast, which actually that's the first time that I'm aware that my music has been played on any radios in Cape Coast and Ghana. So you see, we expanding. You know what I'm saying? I'm on the radios in Accra. Cape Coast is about like 2.5 hours away from Accra. And so I'm glad that my music is reaching more audiences. It's good news. Yes. So big shout outs to the African Superstar family. Today I want to talk about the importance of traveling. I want to talk about some of the places I've been and the impact that traveling has made on my life. I mean, obviously, I live in Ghana, and Ghana is probably one of my most favorite places that I've been so far. Obviously, I've come to settle there, but I've had so many powerful experiences by way of traveling. And so I always promote people to travel a bit more if they can. It's so beneficial. And unfortunately, if you haven't traveled, you get a lot of your information about the outside world through the media, through maybe the internet and other people's experiences. And that can be very, very inaccurate. So today I want to talk about this. Big shout outs to the African Superstar family. Special shout outs to Brown Code Blue. Make sure you hit the likes when you come in the room. Be on code. Today's live stream is about traveling is eye-opening. So in my case, I started traveling when I was very young. I had my first international trip probably before I was even 10 years old. My mother is from Bermuda. And so I used to go to Bermuda every summer and see all of my mother's side because basically we were the only ones in the States. I had an aunt that lived in Pittsburgh for quite a long time, but she ultimately relocated back to Bermuda. So that just left my mom and us in America. So, getting to have traveling experiences, I kind of never really had that fear of flying or fear of other countries because actually, going to Bermuda was always great. Bermuda has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. And obviously I had a lot of friends, well, not even really friends, but family members that were there. And it was always really fun to experience that. And then obviously they had a different accent. So that was intriguing. And they were intrigued by my American accent. So Bermuda was actually the very first place I traveled. The next place I traveled internationally was Italy. And I went to Italy when I was in high school. This is a little unknown fun fact for you guys. What's up, Indy? I see you there. Thank you so much for stopping by. Yes, yes, yes. Brown Coat Blue says people don't have any understanding of the world without traveling. Yes, yes, yes. Indy, I can't see you outside. I don't know what that means. But no, I can't see you outside, dear. Are you outside my door? I don't see you. So the second place that I traveled was Italy. And I don't know if I was 16 or around, I should be around that age. And I was taking Italian in high school. That was the foreign language that I was taking. And we had a class trip. And I remember my mother had been saving up for me. Big shout outs to my mom. I love my mom so much. My mom had been saving savings bonds for me since I was a child, to give me like a big sweet 16 gift. And so she asked me if I wanted to put, my bonds towards a car, or if I wanted to take this trip to Italy. And obviously, a lover of travel, I chose Italy because I really wasn't interested in driving. Another fun fact, I didn't start driving until I was 27 years old. And I really didn't have any option at that time, which is why I started driving. But nonetheless, that's a different story. So I remember when I was heading to Italy, I was hearing from my other classmates, which of course at this time hadn't even been outside the US. A lot of them hadn't been outside the US. The school I went to, which was Fort Hayes, was one of those kind of premier schools that was even offering these school trips to foreign countries. You had the Spanish class I believe they went to Mexico. My big sister was taking Japanese. They had a class to Japan, which she went on, and she also went on the trip to Italy with me. And so, all the schools were not offering these trips, but other students hadn't even been to Italy, and they were already saying, "Oh, they're not going to like you." I remember there was a teacher that was telling us, it was I think it was our science teacher that was kind of telling us these stories about how Italy was, and they're going to be mean to you, and they're racist and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, when I got to Italy, I was having some of those things in my mind, and my experience in Italy was completely different than what people have been telling me. So like, I think for whereas some people are now are just starting to travel maybe in their adulthood or even middle ages, now some of us are getting that same reaction from our peers, which is fear, which is there's nothing out there, and kind of a negative tone. When you actually get out and you see the world, you see that it's different than what people are telling you. So I kind of always had that mindset. And as I went to Bermuda every summer until I went to university. And then from there, I started traveling on my own to international countries. I went to Mexico. I went to Puerto Rico. I went to England in 2014. I started traveling more to the world, and then I started venturing into Africa in 2016. And, that was totally eye opening because obviously growing up in the Western world, you live in a minority mindset, you live in a minority world, unless maybe you live in some of the cities down south and things like that. You have an opportunity to live in a more Black community, or some people that live in DC or places where there are large groups or large communities of Black people. That was a completely different experience. And I realized like, that's what I wanted. That's what I really, really wanted, was to live in a Black world, basically. And so traveling is very eye opening. And I also want to encourage you guys not to have strong opinions about things you don't know. Now, this is a very, very American trait. Americans tend to have very, very, very strong opinions about things they do not know. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've had people tell me all about Africa, tell me all about Europe, and they have never traveled. And you have to question yourself and sometimes gatekeep yourself and ask yourself, where am I getting these ideas from? Why do I feel so passionately about things that I don't know? And if you really want to have a perspective, then go and visit the place, go and travel the place, and then you will see. The other thing I want to add about traveling is you become aware that there are multiple ways to live life. Obviously coming from the Western world has a superiority complex, which projects that their way of life is superior. Their language is superior. Their systems are superior, and so on and so forth. But that's not true. Just like a math equation, if any of you guys remember like basic elementary math, you can have multiple equations to give you the same sum. You can have 4 plus 0 to equal 4, or 2 plus 2, or 3 plus 1, or 5 minus 1. There are multiple equations that will give you the same outcome. And so there are multiple ways of life that give different outcomes, or an outcome, whatever you want. Somebody right now, they love, for instance, the outdoor world. They're a hiker, they're a fisher, they like, mountains, they might enjoy cold weather or whatever. And then there's someone who's like myself, tropical. If the sun shines every day and I don't see a tree turn colors or snow or any of that stuff, I'm good to go. And you kind of customize and pick which lifestyle suits you. And obviously in the Western world, because we are commodities, because we are seen as consumers, and our very existence is just to edify the greedy capitalist world we live in. We're not given a lot of space to evaluate what type of lifestyle we like or what we actually want. This American dream is shoved down our throat as to the future that we should have and what we should aspire. When in reality, some people can be happy with other circumstances. And obviously, I think traveling gives you an opportunity to evaluate different lifestyles, different locations, different cultures, different climates, and maybe pick a place that you like, you enjoy, you can spend more time, things like that. Big shout out to the African Superstar family. I see you, Mr. Uhuru Tut, in the building. Yes. Today I'm talking about traveling is eye-opening, not just specifically traveling to Ghana, but just traveling in general. And it's something I always promote people to do. I mean, I think that a lot of my very unique perspective comes from the position that I have seen a lot of things in my world travel. So today I've been to over 20 countries, 6 of those in Africa, a lot of them in Europe, obviously, and then, around the US, Puerto Rico, Mexico, that kind of thing, Bermuda, and it's really interesting, the different ways of life. I mean, some things are consistent no matter where you go, but some things are different. I remember when I went to Egypt, and it's really funny. So I had gone to Egypt. I think my flight left in the evening. So by the time I got to Egypt, it was quite early in the morning. It was about like 1 or 2 a.m. And then by the time I got an Uber and I got to my hotel and I showered and I had to wind down and all this stuff, I laid down in the bed and I went to sleep. And suddenly I hear this, singing, and it's like probably by then it's probably like about 4 or 5 a.m. And it was the call to prayer. And in Egypt, and probably not just in Egypt, but other countries where, Islam is very prominent, the Muslim community, they have, I'm talking about hundreds of mosques. And they do this call to prayer on like a loudspeaker. So I was laying in the bed and I had just closed my eyes, and then I hear this call to prayer and I'm like, what is that? Like I just couldn't get over it, because that was like the first time I ever had, experienced something like that. And it was just wild to me. And obviously, you get used to it. While you're on the trip, because they do it. They have prayers 5 times a day. The Muslim folks do. But in Muslim countries, I think they kind of use that loudspeaker like every time, 5 times a day. So it was really an interesting experience. These are some of the things that I'll just never forget. And there was a time I went to South Africa, and another funny story. Big shout outs, guys. Hit the likes if you're enjoying today's live stream. I'm talking about traveling and sharing some of my personal traveling experiences. So there was this other time I went to South Africa, and a friend of mine had recently been, and they had took this like totally epic picture at this place called Lion's Head, right? So obviously I wanted to, duplicate the picture when I went there, because I'm like, okay, this is dope. All right. So I go on Google and I Google Lion's Head, and it tells me it's at this national park. So in my mind, I was thinking that it was just like kind of like a platform or something like that you just stand upon and take this picture. So I get to the park and I see this park ranger and I said to him, I said, well, where's Lion's Head? And he turns around and he points to this mountain in the sky. And I'm like, oh God, it's a mountain. Like didn't have any idea it was a mountain. So I was there with the tour guide and the tour guide says to me, well, do you want to, go up this mountain? And I'm like, I was still determined to get this picture. So I'm like, okay, now mind you, I've never hiked, I've never done a mountain or any of that. So he asked me, there's two ways to do the mountain. You can either go up the front way, which involves some type of climbing, kind of like rock climbing and all this stuff, or there's a longer winding path up the back that you can walk. So I'm like, all right, let's do this path. So we start up the path. Big shout outs to Tuco. I see you in the building. Make sure you guys hit the likes if you're enjoying my tales about traveling. So we're going up this path and I'm telling you, we spend 2 hours upward on this path. And I wouldn't even say we're probably halfway. And I'm sitting here and I'm climbing this thing and climbing this. And I'm just like, why in the world? I'm thinking to myself, whoever had the idea that they want to climb the mountain? Like who just sits down and says, yeah, that mountain, I want to get to the top of it. Like, why would you do something like that? And I'm having this thought and I just turn around and I look at this incredible mountain view, and I start crying at the moment because I realized that in that moment, I literally was in a place that millions of people would never be. Like they would never, ever be on a mountain in South Africa getting this view. And that is kind of just a packaging of what traveling can provide you. You're literally having exclusive experiences. And when you calculate it about the masses, like so many people, like if you think about, for instance, if we talk about the diaspora, so many people born and raised in America have never, nor will they ever come to Africa. Either they've lived and died without making the journey, which probably like most of our parents and grandparents go into that category because in previous generations, traveling hasn't necessarily been for leisure apart from the rich and famous. Okay. So we're living in an era where traveling has become much more leisure and much more widespread and much more attainable for the masses. So the fact that you in this day and age perhaps have traveled various places in the world, or you as a member from the diaspora, you've actually gone to the motherland, like not just a concept in your mind about what it's like or the negative ideas, how you feel about it, but you've actually physically been to the motherland, or multiple times you've been to the motherland, or you live on the motherland. It's just incredible. So like, these are the type of things that traveling can add to you. And obviously with more exposure, comes more knowledge. And I think sometimes people shy away from acquiring more knowledge because they say ignorance is bliss. Obviously, the more things you know, that kind of takes away some of the nostalgia and some of the mystery of these things. But I think for me, traveling has been far more positive than negative, and it's added so many things to me. And that's kind of why I talk a lot about traveling, exploring the world, and especially for members of the diaspora. Coming to Africa is a totally eye-opening experience. First of all, seeing it for yourself, not just what the media has told you or the lack of information that we have about the continent. And then also seeing potential opportunities, just living in more peace, where you don't kind of have to deal with certain elements every day because you're part of the general population. Like, people don't know until maybe you talk in certain environments who you are. They're just going to assume that you're a part of the majority. And I think that that's a luxury. And that's something that's not afforded to us anywhere else in the world, outside of the continent. But just and then this striking, incredible natural beauty. The first time I saw a mountain, for instance, ever even attempted a mountain was in South Africa. I've seen them obviously on the roads or in the airplanes, but I've never done a mountain. Also, the first place I saw a waterfall was in Nigeria. Unfortunately, I haven't visited. There are several waterfalls in Ghana. I saw one of the waterfalls just last year. I went to Kintampo Falls, which is a big waterfall in Ghana, but there are a lot of them in Ghana. I haven't visited them, but I went to a huge waterfall called Olu Marine, and that is in Nigeria when I went to visit Dynasty Samir. And when I think back to some of the extraordinary things that traveling has let me see, my eyes, seeing the Eiffel Tower in Paris, seeing, I always obviously want to see the landmarks when you go places. One of the probably most emotional ones for me is Black Star Square. Every time I visit Black Star Square in Ghana, I'm reminded that I have reverse middle passage. I have accomplished that goal of coming, not only coming, but coming and settling in the motherland, and it's been amazing for me. And it's just very, very significant every time I go to Black Star Square. I mean, there's so many other things I want to see, like Victoria Falls, between Zambia and Zimbabwe, and obviously the Renaissance Museum. I mean, the Renaissance. I think it's the Renaissance statue in Senegal. That's just incredible. And there's recently been a new statue that's put up in Benin of a female warrior, and she's huge. And I did see Nelson Mandela in South Africa at the Union Building. There's a huge statue of Nelson Mandela. So traveling is eye opening, and I'm sure some of you guys in the comments can share, various things that you have traveled and seen that were just like eye opening, things that were just incredible. I mean, the first time I went to Paris, I'm not a huge fan of Paris. But it literally was Africa. Like, I saw, obviously there's loads of African people in Paris. I mean, a lot of people from the quote unquote French colonies, when they migrate to the Western world, they go to Paris because they speak French. And so you're going to see a lot of, Cameroonians, you're going to see the Congolese, you're going to see people from Cote d'Ivoire, and, a lot of the French speaking countries. I mean, they go to Paris or France. So I was there, and I was seeing all these, black people, African people. And I was just like, what? Because obviously that's not the way they paint Paris. So then I would go and I was like trying to talk to people, and they would be like, comment allez-vous? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it was mind blowing, because you see all these black people, but they're all French speaking, obviously. So it was just like, wow, this is literally like Africa. And then they were selling like little Eiffel Towers on the corner, like little souvenirs and stuff, just like a market in Africa. So, traveling is eye-opening. That's what I want to tell you guys. And obviously I want to encourage those of you. Some of you, I know that you're like a little nervous. Many of you have maybe not left America, or you've done the cruises, or you've gone to the Caribbean and stuff like that. But the world is so big. The world is so big, and it's interesting. And if you're someone who's kind of into history, like I've always kind of been a museum girl and a artifacts girl. And I mean, it's just wild to see some of these landmarks, like the pyramids in Egypt. I mean, I felt like I had made it in life, because my whole life, from being a kid all the way up to adulthood, you've known about these pyramids, you've seen pictures, and you've learned about them in the textbooks, and to actually see them. And might I add, to see the pyramids in real life is absolutely astounding. I mean, the pictures don't do it any justice. They are so huge. They are so huge that if you go to the base of the pyramids, you can't even get the whole pyramid in like a selfie. I mean, the only way you can get the whole pyramid is you have to go quite a distance away to include the whole pyramid in your picture. They are absolutely fascinating. And also the Nile River. The Nile River is so lush. The only way I can describe it is like it's like liquid velvet. Like the water is beautiful. It sparkles. It looks, I mean, you can't really describe water as lush, but I mean that's how it looks. I mean, it's just supple. It's great. It's fantastic. The Nile is a world wonder. It's the only river that flows the way that it does. A lot of rivers, I believe they flow like north to south, but this one flows the opposite direction. Don't quote me on that, but I know it flows the opposite direction of most rivers. And it's so wide. It's a huge river. So you see these kind of things that you've heard about your whole life, and you actually get to see it with your eyes, and it just makes everything vivid and it makes things come to life. And so yeah, I mean, this is what came on my mind today because I was reflecting, as I often do. I get in my thoughts and I think to myself like, wow, not, some people always make that comment, I'm really my ancestors' wildest dreams. But I know for a fact I am. I know for a fact I'm probably in my immediate family. My younger sister and I we're some of the most traveled individuals in our families. And both of us are, we've lived abroad. My little sister lived in Ethiopia. She did the Peace Corps for a couple years. I've lived in England. I've now lived in Ghana. So, we're literally historic and epic in our families because of our ability to explore the world. And so that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. Big shout outs. What's up? Hero Tut says Zanzibar has another island called Prison Island. I was there last year. There were many things to see. Yeah, Hero Tut. Prison Island is interesting. I went to Prison Island when I was in Zanzibar. What's up, Freddie? Big shout outs. Yes, it is the grandmother of Ghana. I'm in the building. Yes, I have been to Zanzibar. I want to give a shout out to Mr. Dinas Demir. That's a place that I probably wouldn't have ever known about without him. The funny thing is in Columbus, where I grew up, Columbus, Ohio, shout outs to my hometown, there is a bar called Zanzibar. And so my whole life growing up, I thought Zanzibar, was that bar. I didn't know that it was in Tanzania. I didn't know that there was a place. I also had heard the word Timbuktu. There's a saying that from here to Timbuktu, kind of indicating that it's a faraway place. It wasn't until I got older that I realized like Timbuktu is a real place, and Africa has a lot of history. I haven't visited Timbuktu, but these kind of things, it's like, you hear these things and you don't know the real meanings behind these things or if they're specific places. So it's really, really interesting when you actually get to put context to these things. And I look forward to expanding my travels. We hope in the near future. Yes. Because there's still, like I said, there's just so many things I want to see that I haven't seen, but I'm pretty proud of what I have seen so far. I've been to a lot of the places that I really, really wanted to see so far, but obviously we still have the list. We still have the list of those places. And I get inspired too, just like you guys on social media. Some of my, favorite YouTubers, when I see some of their content about various places, and I'm like, wow, I never really considered that. Like recently, I'd say a few months ago, Wodamaya went to Lesotho, which is a Southern African country. I think it's close to South Africa, I believe. And I mean, he was showing the place and it's just absolutely breathtaking. Has a lot of mountains, has a lot of valleys. I mean, it's beautiful. And I was like, wow, I had never, without that content, it wasn't anywhere I had ever considered going. But it's just eye-opening how many things, and again, going back to the African continent, it's astounding the world wonders that are here, that we are unaware of. I mean, It's astounding. So this is maybe your wake up call, family. If this pertains to you, you know that it does. If you're one of those people that's kind of on the fence or you're nervous about traveling, look, I guess for those of you that have tattoos, it's kind of like that. They say once you get that first tattoo, you start planning for the other ones. And a lot of those people that are like totally tatted up, that's what they say. Oh, I got the first one and I realized it wasn't so bad. And then I kind of wanted this and I kind of wanted that. I feel like traveling is kind of like that. Once you sample one place, maybe you're like, okay, well then, and I mean, I guess my travels too also come from a deep seated distrust of the system and the media. So I'm like, I need to see places for myself to know for myself, what I'm dealing with, because you can't really trust, we have to admit, coming from the Western world, we are brainwashed. We get our information from the church, school, and the media. And we all know that those channels are biased and those channels are compromised and those channels are not comprehensive. And since we know that, that means we can't also trust, the full amount of information that we get from there. We need to do our own research. That's very, very critical. And you won't be surprised that once you start doing your own research, you start seeing, wow. I realized that when I started coming to the continent, I realized why they don't want Western Black people to know what's available to them. Because, the coming to the continent is a wild card for so many of us. Opportunities that we wouldn't even think about become attainable for us on the continent because of, our access to the Western currency, our ability to travel. There are some benefits that we get just from being in that environment that we can utilize on the continent. And that's why they largely don't want us to understand that. So sowing in this confusion and these negative perspectives, which keep so many of the diaspora from even just exploring the continent, even just going for a trip, which means at the end of the day, we're going to be the last ones to take advantage of what's available on the continent because we won't even entertain it or we won't even travel there. So again, this message to you folks that have very strong opinions about the world and you have not traveled, first of all, it makes you look very, very ignorant. Hello, number one. And number two, you're going to miss out on opportunities. If you remove all the emotions around maybe the feelings you have about the continent because of history and things like that, Africa is the last final frontier to be developed. And with development comes opportunities, and just like Bitcoin was, $10 a share back in the day came when the stock exploded. And the people that invested in the initial stages became millionaires overnight. You're getting another opportunity to potentially position yourself to do the same on the continent because of the needs and the economic boom and all this stuff that's happening. So don't miss out. Hello, don't miss out. Be logical. Set aside your ignorance for a second to add some context for yourself. People that are very, very ignorant are the ones that think they know everything and they miss out a lot. People that know a lot of things understand they don't know everything. And that's the difference. And that's what makes people that know a lot of things be able to capitalize because, they're more open-minded. They're more willing to explore and try new things and take wisdom from others than people that are very ignorant and think they know everything. So big shout outs, guys. Yes. Let me see some of the comments before I wrap up. You guys make sure you hit the likes. You can also send me some tangible support if you appreciate my content. Yes. Make sure you also subscribe and stream The African Superstar. Yes. You got to show your love for your girl so that we can grow and do more things. Okay. So if you enjoyed today's stream, make sure you hit the likes. All right. Haruta says, I'm always in Ethiopia. I think Haruta, if I'm correct, is your wife Ethiopian? Is your wife Ethiopian? Hirota says, I have never been to Ghana yet. That's my next stop. Yeah, Ghana, I would say probably from East Africa, I found that Ghana is vastly, West Africa as a whole is vastly different than East Africa. But, you know, in my opinion, West Africa is where the vibes are. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just where the vibes are. But obviously, if you have the wife in Ethiopia, that's gonna be your stomping grounds. I mean, Ethiopia is dope. My sister, she lived there, like I said. And I know that I would like to visit one day, and I would love to go to Lalibela. Lalibela, I watched a documentary on TV, and that was the first time I ever became aware of Lalibela. And it's this amazing, structure that is built out of rock in Ethiopia. If you guys are not familiar with Lalibela, and basically this king, I believe he got a dream in the night that he should rebuild Jerusalem in Ethiopia. So they constructed, I think it's about 12 of them, these incredible structures carved directly out of rock, and they're literally huge, and that is in Ethiopia. And so yeah, I learned about Lalibela after my sister had come back from the Peace Corps, and I was just like, what? Like, I didn't even know that was there, kind of thing. So yeah, I'm interested to see that. What's up? What's up? What's up? Brown Coat Blue says, the more you see, the more you understand you can't trust not a damn thing from the media. Say that, Mr. Brown Coat Blue. Hello. Say that. And that's what sidebar. That's what makes me side eye a lot of our people, because I'm like, bro, we know that they're giving us a lot of BS for education. Okay, we know that for a fact, huh? Because we don't learn about our history. Hello. How many of you guys learned about prolific Black inventors after school? You never heard about them ever in school. Let me see a number one. First trivia question. How many of you learned about Black inventors outside of school? You never heard about them. They're not in your textbooks. Hello. A lot of Americans are even poor in geography. Huh? How many times have you had a conversation with someone and you say, oh, I went to Kenya? And they're like, oh yeah, I got a friend that's in South Africa. Bro, two totally different areas of Africa. Huh? Many Westerners, I'm not even going to put this on Europe, because I got to say, Europeans know geography. Americans, hello. A lot of Americans think Africa is a country, not a continent. If you were to ask the average American how many countries are in Africa, they may not know. Now, we know it's 54. Hello, my audience knows that. Yes. But the average American, you would ask them, if you ask them to give you 5 countries from Africa, they might struggle to give you 5 countries. And when I was growing up, I remember the day I learned that Egypt was in Africa. And I always said, well, why? It's like they try to estrange Egypt from the African continent. They never say Egypt is a North African country. They make it stand alone. And quite frankly, Egypt is basically the only country we really learn anything about in our history books. We don't learn about, there might be a little bit about South Africa, about the apartheid. We don't learn dilly squat about East Africa. We might hear a little bit about Ghana. I don't even remember hearing about Ghana growing up. What I remember is Egypt, because they talked about, and obviously I went to a Christian school, so they would talk about it more on the religious edge of Egypt and the relevance to the Bible and all of that. So, we as Blacks growing up in the West, we know that we don't get a comprehensive education. We see how the media is biased to make us look bad. Every time there is a white criminal, they don't mention his name. They won't show his picture. Anytime a Black person does anything, they got your mug shot up there. They're trying to show us all as gangsters and illiterates and, bad people and criminals, so we shouldn't be trusting the media. And when it comes to Africa, we shouldn't trust them with Africa. We shouldn't trust the narrative that, oh, Africans sold you into slavery. Hello? Did the Africans build the ships? Did the Africans build the slave castles? Hello? Were the Africans transporting people? Who did all that stuff? But obviously, all that stuff is not as relevant as, the African hand in it. And it's crazy, like how we omit important information and focus on, small details or fallacies, and we elevate those things over the truth. We should not trust what they have to tell us, guys, about the world, not just Africa, but the world. They will have you scared to go to, Asia. They'll have you scared to go to Mexico. I mean, I went to Mexico several times. I enjoyed Mexico. I went to Cancun. I went to Puerto Vallarta. I love Mexico. I remember when they were, I was getting ready to go. People were like, oh my gosh, the drug cartels. I mean, I know the cartels are off the hook. It's been a while since I went to Mexico, but a lot of that cartel action is not happening in the tourist areas. It's happening in more central residential Mexico, from what I understand, around Mexico City. So those tourist places, typically are very safe. At least when I did research, there weren't any of the instances of the cartels and all that stuff in those areas that I could see. But I mean, when I told people I was going to Mexico, they were, oh my gosh, be careful, this and that. And I'm like, bro, so it's always fear factor when you're talking about traveling. And a lot of us have had totally opposite experiences when we travel than what our friends and family advise us. And again, another pro tip. Hello, make sure you guys hit the likes. I see some of you guys on there. I'm going to finish the comments and be wrapping up. The other thing is that, hello, you don't need to take no advice from people that don't have any passport. Hello, I don't know how many times I could tell you. I don't know how many times I could tell you, because those people that have such strong opinions have never been. So right then and there, your next thing will be like, well, how do you know? How do you know what it's like in Ghana? How do you know what it's like in Mexico? How do you know what it's like in Japan? But I see that a lot of the negativity about international travel is heavily reserved for the continent. They don't care if you say you're going to Paris. They don't care if you say you're going to Puerto Rico, or you're going to the Bahamas, or you're going to Bali. But you say, yeah, I want to go to Africa. Then it's oh my gosh, what are you going to do over there? And and again, your next follow-up question should be, have you been? Do you travel? Do you have a passport? If they say, oh no, well, then their opinion is moot. Again, I have literally never had any fellow world traveler tell me, "Ooh, Gene, I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't go to Ghana. I wouldn't travel in Europe. I wouldn't, I would never." It's always been the untraveled, again, people that are very ignorant. Okay. And again, ignorant is not an insult. Ignorant means you don't know something. Okay. Ignorant means you don't have the knowledge. Okay. And often accompanied with such a strong opinion about things that you don't know about. So we don't want to be part of the ignorant crew. We want to be part of the intelligent crew. We want to be part of the people that, think before they speak and have some context about the things they talk about. That's what we want to be. So big shout outs to you guys. Yes, yes, yes. Tuco says, the only problem for me personally is flying, which I don't enjoy at all. Uhuru says he's giving you some comfort. He says, I used to be afraid to fly, but now I'm over it. It's fun to me now. Big shout outs to you, brother. I see you. He says, I can't wait to fly again. Big shout outs to the African Superstar family. Yes. Yes, Haru. I thought your wife was Ethiopian, so I know you be going back and forth to see her. Yes, yes, yes. Big shout outs to the African Superstar moderators. I see you, Brown Coat Blue, on your block. Shout outs to you. He says, my wife is Ghanaian and I'm looking to check out Ethiopia. So far, I've just done a stopover. Big shout outs to you guys. Yes. Brown Code Blue says Americans have the worst geography and they find the worst possible picture if the subject is black. If it's white, it's a family birthday party photo or sports team picture. Talking about how we know the media is biased. We know how the media makes us look. But then we still trust it when it's telling us about Africa. But at the same time, simultaneously, we know that white folks are vacationing in Africa. Hello? We see them going for safaris and going to South Africa and going here and there, while they're discouraging us from going. Guys, use common sense. Because I'm telling you, I've often talked about it. Okay, we know that, for instance, Ukraine and Russia, they're in war right now. Do we see people trying to go there? We see people trying to go? Do we see people trying to go where ISIS is at? Huh? Do we see people taking holidays to Congo? There's a big conflict in Congo right now. Dangerous places. People don't, there are some wild people, some people always looking for adventure. But a lot of people, your average tourist is not going to go where it's, disease, crime-ridden, dangerous, terrorism. So why are they discouraging us, telling us, hey, Africa, they don't, over there is disease, there's no development, there's nobody there, nobody, but then they are also holidaying there. White folks have been going to the continent for centuries. Why? What is it about it? If the place didn't have nothing going on, why would they be there? So common sense is going to tell you, wait a minute. I feel there's some deception here. Let me get to the bottom. Let me go explore for myself and be the own, my own deciding factors about how I'm going to feel about it. Big shout outs to you. Yes. Uhuru says, some of my friends are not interested in Africa, I believe, because of fear of what they've heard in social media. And he follows up with Africa is beautiful. Well, what I say here on the channel a lot of times is example is paramount. It's not always for us to be having evangelistic conversations with our friends and family to make them believers. But sometimes it's just our behavior that says, yes, the place has got to be straight. Because I know a friend or family member that lives there, that goes there. I'm pretty sure my name at this point comes up in conversations in defense of Africa a lot of times. People probably like, yeah, I know the African superstar. She's over there. She's on TV. She's a music star. She did all this when she moved there, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure because of the example that you set and the way that you live your life. And so for the fellas, I know there's brothers in your environment. They might give you hell about the continent, but they're watching you. They are watching you. That's one of the reasons that this passport bro movement exploded and Kevin Samuels exploded, because people watch you. It's part of your influence. And so for a lot of us who have love for the continent or, we're making our way, just keep pushing along on your journey. And that will be prolific enough. That's enough. That's enough. You don't always have to be trying to convince people and all of that. If they ask you questions, sure, you can answer them, but just let them see how you're living. Let them see how you're living. So big shout out to you guys. Thank you for your time today. Much love to the family. We had over 20 of you here today and the likes is looking nice. Yes, you guys did good. If you're new to my platform and you enjoyed today, please make sure you subscribe. I would love to have you. I'm an international award-winning musician, so you can check out the African Superstar on your streaming platforms. I'm also currently featured on a daily series in Ghana. You can find the series on DSTV and Showmax. It is called House of Clue. Yes, so you can look out for your African Superstar on the big screen. Yes, family. And also don't forget, if you are planning trips to Ghana and you need some help, you need someone to, you want to have maybe one-on-one tour, don't hesitate to reach out to me at africansuperstar@gmail.com and I can help you plan that, put that together for you. We also have an upcoming group tour October 19th through the 26th, me and Mr. Taye Uhuru in Accra, Ghana. So you can book and see our full itinerary at www.tayeehuru. So that's uhuru.com. Until we meet again, stay black and true. If you ain't black, just stay true.